I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look and ranking the hardest enemy from each Soulsborne game, from Demon Souls all the way to Elden Ring. Now this is obviously a very subjective topic, as build type, item loadout, and overall player level can really affect how you handle regular enemies. So I'll be going purely based off of my own personal playthroughs and we'll go from there. Also, for Elden Ring, I won't be including any Shadow of the Erdtree enemies, as I just haven't had enough time with them to dedicate whether they're the toughest or not. So let's jump right in, the toughest enemy from each Soulsborne game, ranked. Let me know your hardest down below. For Demon Souls, I've decided to focus on the skeletons found within the Shrine of Storms. While I was tempted to include the rockworms found in 2-2 due to their surprisingly dangerous lava spew attacks, I've ultimately died more to the skeletons of 4-1 and 4-2 than any other encounter in the game. Whether it's the basic variants that roll towards you from the first stairways, to that narrow section of the level at the start of 4-2 where you're dealing with multiple skeletons on a cliffside, or any time the golden skeletons show up with their high defense and damage, you're in for a tough time. In my original Demon Souls playthrough, I wasn't really aware of the world tendency mechanic, so on top of the basic skeletons of 4-2, I also spawned in the Red Phantom variants that caused even more trouble for me while attempting to make progress. They all hit hard, they take a large chunk of stamina when blocked, and they're numerous so you can never let your guard down. No other Souls game has skeletons quite as dangerous as these, which I have to say is mighty impressive for a series spanning this many years. Surely they wouldn't make a skeleton more dangerous than these guys for the next game, right? For Dark Souls, I had to set aside enemies like Black Knights or Silver Knights because of their easy parry windows. Titanite demons were a pretty close choice as well, but their nature as non-respawning enemies with a soul exception doesn't really match the energy I want from this list. I was so close to putting the cats from Darkroot Garden on here as well, because the way they ambush you is brutal, and they've got a lot of damage potential that is hard to mitigate at the best of times. Predictably though, my vote goes to the Bone Dog skeletons of the Tomb of the Giants. While they've got the vision of a blind person, allowing the player to sneak up on them with relative ease, if you let these skeletal behemoths get off any attacks, you'll find your health bar shredded by their wild, aggressive flurry of strikes. The rest of the skeletons in this game, including the Bone Wheels, are significantly easier to handle by comparison, but I'm mostly convinced of the Bone Dog skeleton's difficulty due to my Dark Souls randomizer series. Just watch any episode and you'll probably see me getting killed or harassed by Bone Dogs, to the point where they've become a sworn enemy of the state. I dread them. I recognize their sound cues now so I can brace myself for the oncoming pain, and if that's not an admission of strength, I don't know what is. For Dark Souls 2, I'm going to pick an enemy completely out of left field and talk about the masked mannequins found in Earthen Peak. You know the ones, the rogues who do their flippy shit while throwing poison knives at the player, situated in all the perfect spots to perform an ambush. I really don't consider many, if any, of Dark Souls 2's enemies to be overly difficult. Maybe the mages in Shrine of Amana if I'm not taking it carefully, perhaps the reindeer in the frigid outskirts who have made people's lives a living hell, or the Alon Knights in the first part of Iron Keep. But these mannequins have killed me more times than I care to admit because they're just weak enough to where you underestimate them, but just strong enough to where they can capitalize on that weakness to break you under their thumb. I've gone into fights with these guys getting ambushed by a pair and thinking, I'll bonk the first one, no problem, and then kill the second, only to miss my strength swing, have them jump away, and then slay me while I'm recovering. They're not a conventional choice by any means, but I think that's what makes this video fun, because I don't have to always go with the obvious or the most infamous. So take the sentence I said at the end of the last entry and chuck it out the window, because the hardest enemies in Bloodborne are those damned fishing hamlet sharks. While the Winter Lanterns are a close second due to their damning frenzy build-up, I can't help but focus on the fact that there's only one encounter I've cheesed completely in Bloodborne, and it was the 2 sharks in the well you have to kill to get the Rakuyo. There's no reason for this pair to be as hard as they are, and yet when you have an extremely aggressive pair of enemies who have no problem causing chaos a lot of the time, combined with a rather cramped space that doesn't give you a lot of room for cover, it creates hell on Earth. The sharks in the hamlet itself are a bit more bearable, as you can fight them after clearing out regular enemies, allowing you to learn their movesets. But their terrifying lunges and vast reach make them tough to fight, and even more so if you're locking on with the camera. Their weakness to lightning is at least something to give you an edge, but you're better off just running past these enemies and using the cheese method on the pair in the well to achieve the Rakuyo, and when an enemy is better cheesed than fought, you've got a recipe for a tough battle. Dark Souls 3 is where I feel this list will deviate for some people. You could pick the Knights of the Ringed City for being these insane endgame threats that are designed to pack a punch and look good doing so. What about the lesser Irithyll Knights, whose Beyblade spins can ruin your stamina in an instant? The Grus of Farron Keep and the Snake Men of Archdragon Peak are there too, with awkward hitboxes and deceptively aggressive movesets. But for me, I've always struggled with the basic Lothric Knights. I wish I could figure out what makes their movesets so tough for me, but I've just never been good at fighting them. Yes, you can backstab Lothric Knights with careful positioning, but choose to go on the offensive and you'll often get a spear to the face or get blocked by a Great Shield. I had to farm them in the Lothric Castle portion of the game for sunlight medals, and let me tell you, that was some of the most frustrating gameplay I've ever done, as I could never get their patterns down and found myself dying as much as I was killing them. Worse, when later variants after the Bridge with the Dragons also have other enemies around that can heal and buff them. You don't know fear until you see an elite Lothric Knight charging at you with a damage buff, while you know it's going to eat into your stamina or your health with one wrong move. It's actually refreshing to have what many would consider to be a very basic enemy be one of the toughest to overcome in-game. I'll never feel safe when I see a Lothric Knight, but I'm honestly okay with that. Moving to Sekiro, I think many of the basic enemies in these games can be very dangerous if you fall out of your gameplay rhythm, but there's one enemy type that, even to this day, I still haven't found the best way to counter: the Spear Adepts of Senpo Temple. These monks can be found in the main courtyard of the lower temple, as well as littered across the upper balconies leading to the folding screen monkeys boss fight, and they are brutal. Their Naginata combos, combined with a rather startling amount of agility, can be overwhelming. The first 2 you fight are found solo, which allows you to try learning their movesets, but the group towards the end of the level often aggroes together, which means you'll be trying to dodge the spear of one opponent, only to get staggered by another from behind. Then the one you're fighting jumps away, and suddenly you're fleeing past them because fuck that. The only plus, if you have the aerial death blow skill unlocked, you can catch them in mid-air, which is insanely satisfying to pull off. Not something I've ever had early game, but makes New Game Plus runs a lot easier to get through. I don't think I even have a ton of gameplay of me fighting these enemies because I just can't be arsed with them. And that's my point. Last up we have Elden Ring, and I'm going to volunteer my old nemesis, the Royal Revenants, for this list. Now yes, I am fully aware that they have insane weaknesses to holy damage and get hurt when you use the heal spell, which is brilliant, I love that for Faith users. But for anyone who isn't running a holy build, prepare to deal with some of the most obnoxious movesets around. The teleporting is one thing, I can handle that on a good day. The poison vomit is one thing, I can handle that on a good day. The flailing combos that never seem to end without your stamina being broken and your health bar shattered, that's another thing entirely. Even when I've got an overpowered build and I've leveled my character to a high point, the Royal Revenants still find a way to make me their bitch, and I just have to admit defeat after a certain point. Bonus goes to the Tibia Mariner in the DLC who summons a Royal Revenant to fight you instead of his usual skeletons. That was just lovely from Software. Honourable mentions, of course, go to the Banished Knight in Castle Sol, you know the one, you're seeing him on screen now. The Ancestral 360-degree no-scope snipers who can shoot you off of Torrent from 100 miles away. And what about the Kindred of Rot and their Pest Freds? And if we do want to include a DLC enemy, I would say maybe the Horn Knights in Ene Elim, the ones that use elements. I really struggle with them. But no, the Royal Revenants have killed me more than any other enemy in this game, and thus they get featured as my least favourite and toughest regular enemy of Elden Ring. And that's today's list. Do you agree with my picks? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. My social medias are on screen now. Feel free to follow me if you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter or my Discord. My Twitter is the best place to go though. A massive shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. Thank you so much, you guys are amazing. And I'll see you next time for another video. Adios!